What's up, friend, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to have a look at the 10 best cards from Lorwyn Eclipsed for Standard Constructed. We'll also have a look at 5 cards that are pretty hyped up, but I consider them to be trap cards. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an overview of Lorwyn Eclipsed, which I think is a pretty good set, by the way. I think some people say that Lorwyn Eclipsed is quite low in power level, but I kind of disagree. I think it's up there as one of the stronger sets. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily on an Avatar power level or a Bloomburrow power level or Duskmourn, but it's very, very close. It's definitely not an Ether Drift or Spider-Man equivalent. So let's dive into the top 10 best cards for Standard Constructed first. It will not be in any ranked order. It's just, 10 cards. And I think these are all going to be really impactful in the format. So let's get started. So the first card on my list is Formidable Speaker, a 3-mana 2/4 elf druid creature, and when it enters you may discard a card. If you do, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. For 1 mana and its tap, you can also untap another target permanent. So this card is just fantastic in so many ways. I mean, a 3-mana 2/4 isn't even that bad. You have the untap effect on top of it, but the searching for a creature that you need is so incredibly strong and fits into so many of these like top tier standard decks right now. A couple of decks that come to mind, like you could be thinking about this card in Simic or Roboroid. You get later into the game, you're top decking like mana dorks or whatever, or mana dorks don't really have their value anymore. You could discard like a Llanowar Elves and grab yourself an Roboroid. You could grab yourself a Quantum Riddler. That's already really powerful. And of course, Kavera Reanimator is like, this card is basically designed for the Sultai Reanimator deck list. You could basically discard a Bringer of Last Gift card and then tutor up a Kavera, which is kind of the whole combo put together. It's just incredibly strong in that. You could even see this in Landfall, like the Selesnya or Mono Green Landfall deck list with Icesteel Explorer. They revolve around Mightform Harmonizer. So you could maybe discard a land for your Icesteel Explorer and then tutor up like a Mightform Harmonizer so that your deck does what it needs to do. And then of course, like another deck that it would be perfect in is Bent Airbending combo. So, it kind of just finds all the combo pieces for you. Simultaneously, you can keep airbending it so that you can find all the pieces you need. Appa, Aang, and Doc Arlok, and then you're basically good to go. So that's already a bunch of like top tier standard decks that I just listed off. The Formidable Speaker can just slot into perfectly. It's going to see a lot of standard play. Next on my list, I have Spell Snare, a 1-mana instant where you counter a target spell with mana value 2. This has been a modern staple for quite some time. It's actually crazy that it's legal in Standard now, but it's very welcome because Standard is constantly getting faster and faster. I'm sure you're aware of that. And this hits many key cards in the format. A couple of cards that it hits out of like the Simic deck list, you have Badger Mole and Leyline Weavers. Out of Izzet Lessons, you have cards like Accumulate Wisdom and Artist Talent. There's also like Fear of Missing Out that you can hit out of the Izzet deck list. In the Mare, you could hit cards like Deep Cavern Bat, Floodbin Drowner. You have Star Charts and Get Lost against Control. Against aggro, you have things like Emberheart Challenger. This card is always going to find some targets in Standard. And I think if it fits the strategy of your deck list, you definitely want to be picking up some Spell Snares, and it's definitely going to see a good amount of Standard play. Now, as somebody that enjoys playing black decks, I was so incredibly relieved to see Recruiting Hex. This is a 1-mana instant. The additional cost to cast a spell, you may blight 1, so that means you may put a -1/-1 counter on a creature you control. You then destroy a target creature with mana value 2 or less. If the spell's additional cost is paid, you get to gain 2 life as well. Most black decks in the format have to rely on something like Stab in the 1-mana removal slot, which is just awful. Like, Stab is so incredibly mid, especially if you compare it to what we had in the past, like Cut Down. So it definitely made black decks in the format feel a lot worse than they should, especially because there's so many like small creatures that you really need to answer. Reckoning Hex is our best option now in the 1-mana slot. I mean, part of me would have still liked to see Cut Down back. I think it would have been a little bit better, but Reckoning Hex is just more than welcome regardless. I also think that the gain 2 life stuff can be really clutch sometimes. You could see that buy you an extra turn, and hopefully sometimes that's more than enough. But yeah, Reckoning Hex is cool. I also think like the blighting can synergize with certain decks. Like there's definitely the Dimir Fairies in Lorwyn that have certain effects where you can take a --/ counter off a creature to do something. Reckoning Hex will feel especially good in those decks. But like any deck that is in black, like Dimir mid-range, Mono Black mid-range, like Orzhov mid-range, will definitely be picking up Reckoning Hex. So it's for sure going to be a card that's going to see a lot of standard play. And if you're somebody that is, trying to interact with your opponent's cards, Reckoning Hex is definitely something that you need to pick up in the format for sure. Next on my list, I have a 3-mana Planeswalker, Ajani Outland Chaperone. It has 3 loyalty, and for +1, you create a 1/1 green and white Githkin creature token. For -2, Ajani deals 4 damage to target tapped creature, and the -8, the ultimate. Look at the top X cards of your library where X is your life total. You may put any number of non-land permanent cards in mana value 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So often in Standard, 3-mana planeswalkers that remove something are great. Think of something like Liliana of the Veil, and Ajani is going to be doing exactly that. But also when I looked at Ajani, the card reminded me a lot of Wandering Emperor. Now, it's nowhere near as strong as Wandering Emperor, because that card was just crazy pushed, but it has like similar vibes. Like it interacts with tapped creatures, it protects itself by making like a blocker, and I think Ajani just hits the marks of being super playable. Also, like token strategies in white have always been pretty good in Standard. We still have cards like Caretaker's Talent, Enduring Innocence, but I think this could fit into a wide variety of decks like white token control, regular tokens. You could see play in like Jeskai control, maybe for instance, Azorius control. It just does everything you kind of want out of a 3-mana planeswalker. I don't think you really want to focus too much on getting to the ultimate. Like, I don't think that's really the most important part about it. But just making some blockers, you know, interacting with creatures is going to be pretty valuable. And yeah, I think Ajani's got good chances of seeing a good amount of play for that reason. I think it fits into a good amount of like, you know, tier 2 standard decks. But also in general, like having a planeswalker as a sideboard card can also be really great, especially against like the Lesson deck. So yeah, I feel good about Ajani. Then we have our first Evoke Elemental on this list, and there's a couple more ahead. This is Wistfulness, a 5-mana 6/5 elemental incarnation creature. When it enters, if green was spent to cast it, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. When this creature enters, if blue was spent to cast it, draw 2 cards and discard a card. You can evoke it for 2, which means you cast a spell for its evoke cost, and if you do, it's sacrificed when it enters. So this card is just super relevant in Standard. There's a lot of artifacts and enchantments that are just seeing a ton of play. Think about Artist Talent, Monument to Endurance, Seam Rips, Stormchaser's Talent. But what I also really like about this card is that it exiles the enduring creatures. Think about Enduring Innocence or Enduring Curiosity. It's going to be really good against that. And I also don't think that the looting effect should be underestimated. I mean, in something like the Simic Ouroboros decklist, you could discard, you know, your mana dorks if you top deck them and later into the game, and then, you know, get yourself some new cards. Or, you know, even in combination with like a Quantum Riddler, if you're out of cards, it's going to be great to get that like looting started. So I think Wistfulness is definitely a card that slots very well into the Standard meta game. We're going to see a good amount of it. Okay, so then I have another Evoke Elemental for you. This is Emptiness. This is the Ortov one. It's a 3/5 creature, and when it enters, if white was spent to cast it, return target creature card mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And if it enters, if black was spent to cast it, put 3 -1/-1 counters on the 1 target creature with an evoke cost of 2. I just think this is such a solid creature. It's super flexible, and both of the modes are just good. The removal is always welcome, but the Reanimator fact is just so fantastic as well. Like, imagine bringing back something like a Preacher of the Schism, but also I'm kind of hoping that perhaps this is a way for us to revive Abhorrent Oculus. It's definitely a card that I would play any day over something like Helping Hand because of the flexibility, but I think it's just going to be a nice pickup for, you know, your Ortov or Esper mid-range decklist. The value is just good, and I think the Esper mid-range or, you know, Ortov mid-range decks do have a lot of support from the set as well, with cards like Reckoning Hex, Ajani that you saw prior to this. So quite excited for that. I think Emptiness just does so many good things that I'd be shocked that it wouldn't see a good amount of Standard play. So Emptiness definitely worthy of being on this list. And next up, Moonshadow. 1 mana, 7/7 elemental with menace, but it enters with 6 -1/-1 counters on it. Whenever one of our permanent cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere while this creature has a -1/- counter on it, remove a -1 counter from this creature. So this is just an insane threat for 1 mana, and there's a lot of ways to break this card. I have made a video on Moonshadow in combination with Likeness Looter, which is a great way to copy Moonshadow out of your graveyard. You can also work with Manifesting Dread. You can turn this creature face up, so you don't have to suffer that like ETB effect, so you just have it as a 7/7. You could also combine it with something like Reese from the set, which is a white card that takes off all counters from a creature. But it's also just incredible turn 1 play in decks with like looting effects. So think about things like Fear of Missing Out, or think about your Tursas. You can also see this in something like Mono Black Aggro. Definitely want to explore that. But you play it alongside cards like Stalactite Stalker and Starling Gorehound. Gotta make sure you have a lot of surveilling and a lot of ways to put things into the graveyard. I just think it fits into a lot of like different decks. Creatures at 1 mana that grow over time are usually like the backbone of aggro strategies regardless. So I think Moonshadow has fantastic potential. I think there's a lot of like great synergies with it in Standard already. And yeah, I have high hopes for this card. Next on my list, I have another black creature, Bitterbloom Bear, 2 mana 1/1, Fairy Rogue with Flash and Flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life, and you create a 1/1 blue and black fairy creature token with Flying. Now, what really sells this card for me is the fact that it has Flash. I don't think I'd like it nearly as much if it didn't have Flash, but fortunately for us, it does. So what we can do with this card is just like flash it in at our opponent's end step, and at the beginning of our upkeep, we're gonna immediately get value out of it because we're gonna make a 1/1 fairy, and then we can protect it, which really works nicely within the Dimir fairy archetype. Like, there's definitely access to good counter magic. Think about Spell Stutter, the fairy counter spell, or things like Spell Pierce, Spell Snare, whatever. Protect the card, and you're going to get value out of it every single turn. And those 1/1 fairies are super relevant in that strategy as well. You have cards like Enduring Curiosity, that's just great the wider your board goes. But even the new like Flitterwing Nuisance has that Enduring Curiosity text on there. You could activate the ability and draw a card for every creature that connects to the face. So Bitterbloom Bear is fantastic with that. We can also work with Bitterbloom Bear in more like, you know, it doesn't have to be specifically fairies. Just if you care about like making tokens or having a whiteboard in general, you can make this work. But I definitely think that the Mare deck is just best for this because being able to protect this card is just going to work out super well for you. I think it is very strong. I mean, back in the day, Bitter Blossom was definitely you know, a banger too. So Bitterbloom Bear, I think, has everything what it takes to definitely push fairies into a top tier range. And I think the second you just work around the card and make sure that you have ways to protect it, it's just going to be taking over games. So hopefully we're going to see a lot of Bitterbloom Bear. I think that will be the case. Next on my list, I have a little treat for the red decks. This is Seer, a 2-mana instant. Deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So there are definitely red decks in Standard that are playing Obliterating Bolt, which is a 2-mana sorcery that deals 4 damage to creature or planeswalker. And if it dies that turn, it would exile. Personally, I would play an instant speed spell over a sorcery speed spell that exiles any day in the current Standard format. This card can hit things like Auroboroids, this hits Appas, this hits Kaitos, and it's just a very flexible removal spell that's going to see play in a wide variety of red decks. Now, I will say it's the only red card in my top 10, but I do think there are some very relevant cards in red for the Standard format. A couple of cards that come to mind is like Boulder Dash. That's a 2-mana sorcery that deals 2 damage to any target and 1 damage to any other target. But they could clean up some Badgermal board states or maybe an Otter token and Gran. You also have Impolite Entrance, which I think is really awesome for mono red aggro or specifically the Leyline aggro decks. It's a sorcery that target creature gains trample and haste until the end of turn. You also get to draw a card for 1 mana. Those are all really good too. But I think Seer is just worthy of being in this top 10 list because I think just a wider variety of decks can pick it up. And removal tends to see a good amount of Standard play, especially with so many of these unfair strategies going on. So Seer makes my top 10 for that reason, but if you are a red enjoyer, there's definitely some more out of Lorwyn Eclipsed for you to pick up. You're going to see a lot of Seer for sure. And last but not least, in my top 10 is Deceit, a 6-mana Evoke Elemental again, this time around in the Mare colors. Get a 5/5 creature, and if blue was meant to cast it, return up to 1 other target non-net permanent to its owner's hand. And if it enters, if black was meant to cast it, target opponent reveals your hand, you choose a non-net card from it, and the player discards that card with an Evoke cost of 2. So unfortunately, this card is pretty broken in combination with Kavero or Superior Spider-Man. If you cast that card, spending blue and black, and you copy Deceit out of your graveyard, you get both the modes. Of course, leave it up to Kavero to break one of the Evoke Elementals, as usual. But, you know, I think also Kavero in general is kind of like the big winner out of all the top tier decks from Lorwyn Eclipsed because it gets so many new upgrades, like Formidable Speaker as well. The Seed card's gonna be really good, so massive Kavero stonks from Lorwyn Eclipsed. But back to the Seed, I think this is just a creature that does so many good things. Like, I'm willing to bet that in nearly every single Standard game that you play, either bouncing or discarding something out of your opponent's hand is going to be relevant. So for that reason, I think it's really flexible, just good value. Going to see play in like Dimir mid-range decks or Esper or like Sultai. So it'll find a place in the format because it just does really good things. All right, well, of course, we need to have an 11th card in here because this video would not be complete without mentioning the Shocklands. I'm so happy to finally see this cycle in Standard fully. There were definitely color combinations that really suffered under not having the shocks. Rakdos was one of them. Celestia also really suffered. It felt like when you were playing a Celestia or a Rakdos deck, you were just so far behind already because your mana was just bad. Fortunately, that's no longer going to be the case. With things like Blood Crypt, Multiversal Passage, and Starting Town, most color combinations in Standard will stand a chance instead of having to suffer through your matches. Like, felt like you were already lost when you were playing against something like Ortsov. You're playing Rakdos, they have premium mana. You had just had the wackest stuff ever to work with. So really excited to have the Shocks here. One of the safest cards to craft and put your wildcards into. Premium mana really helps so much. And I'm glad that Lorwyn Eclipsed has finally completed the cycle in Standard. Definitely worthy of being on this list. I am so happy to have my beloved Blood Crypt back in Standard. And next up in this video, we're going to have a look at 5 cards that have been pretty hyped up by the community, but I think they are absolute trap cards. Now, of course, this is just speculating, like you never know what the future brings. Perhaps the next set that comes out is really going to push any of these cards over the edge, and all of a sudden they're great. But as of recording this, as of right now, I think these cards are absolute traps in Standard, and I would not spend my wildcards on them. So let's get started. The first card that I think is going to be a trap in Standard is Loch Mare. This is a 2-mana 4/5 creature, but it enters with 3 -1/-1 counters on it. For 2 mana, you get to remove a counter from this creature to draw a card. And for 3 mana, you can remove 2 counters from this creature to tap a target creature and put a stun counter on it. So I saw a lot of people in my chat be like, oh my god, have you seen Loch Mare? This card is broken. I looked at it and I'm like, huh, that is so incredibly slow. What are we even supposed to do with this, right? Like, I cannot really picture it in any relevant Standard deck. I've seen people try to experiment with it in like the mere mid-range, or maybe even in control decks. You know, the idea behind that being that either you're holding up a counter spell, and if your opponent plays nothing out, you can activate an ability on the Loch Mare. But even at the end of the day, like, this would still be a vanilla 4/5 after you pump a ton of mana into this thing. Standard is just so incredibly fast, and I rarely think you're going to be in a situation where, you know, the Disneyland scenario plays out right in front of you, where, you know, this creature just happens to lay on the battlefield. Your opponent doesn't really pressure you anywhere, and you could just happily pump your mana into the Loch Mare. Like, I just don't really see it happen. I would much rather play an impactful card draw card like Stock Up or Star Charts or something. Or I'd much rather play something that actually removes the creature or is much more relevant when it comes to stunning, like a Kaito or Floodpit Drowner. I like the idea behind the card. I think the design is really interesting, but I don't really see a card like this that requires so much mana being pumped into it to be, you know, good, actually be successful strategy in Standard. So yeah, I don't think Loch Mare is looking great. I think the design is nice, but it's just not realistic for the current Standard format, in my opinion. And the next trap card on my list, and some of you are going to be really mad, and I'm really sorry about that, but I gotta speak real. Oko Lorwyn Liege. 3 mana, 3 loyalty. At the beginning of your first main phase, may pay green if you do transform Oko. For +2 up to 1, target creature gains all creature types. +1, target creature gets -2, -0 until your next turn. If you transform him, you get Oko Shadowmoor Scion, and you can transform that back for blue. For -1, you mill 3 cards, and you may put a permanent card from among them into your hand. The -3, you create 2 3/3 green elk creature tokens. And the -6, the ultimate, you choose a creature type, you get an emblem with creatures you control have of the chosen type, get +2/+3, and have vigilance and hexproof. So I have a lot of issues with this card. I think the best thing it can do is make those elk tokens. Like, realistically, that's the best it's gonna get. But this card, first of all, locks you into Simic colors, right? Like, you have to either play Simic or like Sultai or something like that, because this card doesn't really work if you don't transform it to the backside, in my opinion. Obviously, the design behind it is uptick it with the front side, and then once you have enough loyalty points, transform it into the backside, and then take advantage of those like elk tokens, I guess. The ultimate, I don't think ever is going to happen, and even then, if it still happens, it's so restricted towards like a very specific type of deck. Like, the best I can see Oko performing is maybe Sultai Demons or something, where you have your Unholy Annexes and you turn something into a demon so it works with the annex, or, you know, something like that, I guess. But in general, my issue with Oko is also just that the card is really, really slow. I mean, the +1 giving a target creature -2, -0 until your next turn is fine. Like, most of the time your opponent is going to have a board with multiple creatures by the time Oko comes down, so you're not really going to be able to protect yourself with Oko. The +2 kind of just does nothing most of the time when it gets played on turn 3. Later on in the game, I even don't think it does that much. Like the +2 most of the time is really going to be to get the benefits of the backside of Oko. The -1 is average, like mill 3 cards and put 1 into your hand, like okay, I guess. Like, I don't know. I think people definitely underestimate when it comes to these like transform cards how crippling it can be to have to spend 1 mana on your upkeep to transform them. You know, it's going to demand mana from you every time you play it most of the time. It doesn't really protect itself well enough. I don't think the effects of the payoff effects are necessarily that worth it. Locks you into simicolors. I think Oko is just a trap. I'm sorry to say it, but I think there's definitely something where they've been very careful with the Okos that they've printed. Like we have another Oko legal and standard in case you forgot the OTJ Oko. They just really messed up big time with the first Oko they ever printed, being probably the best Planeswalker in the entirety of Magic the Gathering. And ever since that, Oko is just, you know, receiving some punishment. I think this one is, yeah, if you compare this to something like Ajani wins any day. I think there may definitely be some like niche strategies where the card can shine, but on average, it's just never really going to be doing that much for you. It's very slow. Like, how would this card ever fit into Simic, Roboroid, whatever? It's very slow, very grindy, and the payoff isn't even that good. So I'm sorry, Oko, but yeah, you're still getting punished for your sins of the past, I fear. Next on my list is Meek Attack. Now, don't get me wrong, this card is so fun, but there's a couple of issues with it. It's a 3 mana enchantment, and for 2 mana, you may put a creature card with total power and toughness 5 or less from your hand onto the battlefield. The creature gains haste. At the beginning of your next end step, sacrifice this creature. So yeah, like I said, really fun card, but I think it's very tricky to go shields down on turn 3 for something that doesn't directly impact the board. Like, the best we can do with this thing is the Famished Wolfsire or something like Threefold Thunderhulk, but I think this is just like a fun content creator card, and you can definitely expect a Meek Attack deck list for me. But I think if you're somebody that wants to put your wildcard into something precious, Meek Attack is most likely not going to get you something over a 50% win rate. I think more often than not, you're going to be sitting under a 50% win rate with this card. There could definitely be some really fun things, like I think Meek Attack in combination with something like an Unstoppable Slasher can be explored. 3 mana, put it on the battlefield, do nothing. And then for 2 mana, you need to also have like the right cards in your hand. Like, that's kind of my issue with the Threefold Thunderhulk and Famished Wolfsire strategy. It's like, it's just so kind of slow, and you gotta be working with a Disneyland scenario to really be cooking with this card. But I love the design. Really fun. Also speaks a little bit of like, you know, the past like Sneak Attack or whatever. Yeah, it's just a bit too safe, and I think it's just a bit too slow for Standard 2 and nothing really broken. But hey, maybe in the future, they're gonna print some cards that are gonna be awesome in Meek Attack. All of a sudden you go from like 8 really powerful creatures to like, I don't know, 16, and you have a very solid deck list. So, or maybe somebody has figured out a way to break it, and it's just not obvious to me at the moment. But I find it very hard to see you basically skipping your turn 3 play to get an effect like this that works on creatures with a combined power and toughness of 5. I just don't see it happen, but very fun strategy regardless. And sometimes having fun is more important than winning games. Meek Attack will be one of those cards that, yeah, that has to be your priority if you want to play this thing. Trap card number 4 is Aurora Awakener, a 7 mana 7/7 giant druid creature with trample and that vivid mechanic. So whenever this creature enters, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X permanent cards for X is the number of colors among permanents you control. Put any number of those permanent cards onto the battlefield and put the rest of the revealed cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is on my trap card list, because a lot of people in my chat were super excited for this, thought it was busted. And then you have to point out, oh, you know, this thing can actually just hit lands. And that's what kind of kills the card. Like, you're not guaranteed non-land permanents, so you can kind of like build your deck around getting super great value out of this. Nope, you could just, you know, have bad luck and put 2 lands into the battlefield or something. Because the Vivid is also really significant, right? Like, the more colors you have among permanents, the better this thing is going to be. Very often, you're going to have maybe 2. So then you're going to have a look at like 2 cards. And if that's a land and something mid, then that's it. Like, Aurora Awakener is just not really done enough, because it's only upon entering the battlefield as well. So like, it's not if you can get another trigger in the future through like attacking. Of course, a 7/7 with trample is still good, but you'd really see this card in something like Kona perhaps, or like Smuggler Surprise style decks. It's also kind of like random encounter energy, but then random encounter still does more than Aurora Awakener can do. But I definitely have this card on my trap card list specifically because a lot of people seem to forget that it hits permanent cards, which includes lands, and I think that just really kills the card for me. So be aware of that if you're trying to cook up something with Aurora Awakener. And the last card on my trap list is Hexing Squelcher. 2 mana 2/2 Goblin Sorcerer, cannot be countered, ward pay to life. Spells you control can't be countered, and other creature control have ward pay to life. This has to be one of the most hyped up cards in the set. I think it's also one of the most expensive rare creatures as of now. However, us standard gamers, we have to realize this card is not for us. The hype and the cost all comes from older formats and like goblin decks in those older formats. All of this, what the Hexing Squelcher says, is a lot more relevant there, especially the fact that your spells can be countered is really good there. In standard, it's just not the format where a card like this shines in. At best, it is a sideboard card. But I mean, I guess if the entirety of the standard format turns into counterspell.deck against counterspell.deck, maybe then it becomes good and I can like eat my words. But we also have things like Frenzied Bailiff that are standard legal, and the cannot be countered effect is rarely relevant from the Frenzied Bailiff. Simultaneously, everybody knows that if you're playing a Badgermal deck, the Badgermal is going to die. And unfortunately, Hexing Squelcher dies to everything that the Badgermal dies to, so you'll be suffering under Pyroclasms, Fire Magics, Day of Black Suns, you know, the Torture Towers, whatever else removal people are playing to target the Badgermal. This thing is going to suffer under that as well. Now, your opponent will lose 2 life as that happens, but I don't think that is significant enough in a format like Standard. Yeah, like at best it's a sideboard card, but at the moment I would not waste my rares on it, and I think we just have to accept that this thing is very good, just not for us. So that is kind of the end of my Lorwyn mini set review here for YouTube. 10 best cards for Standard, and then also some trap cards that I would not spend my wildcards on if I were you. I mean, like I said it earlier, things can always change. New sets can always change things if we look back on this in the future, but as of now, that's how I feel about Lorwyn Eclipsed. I think it's a very powerful set. I think people are definitely underestimating it. And yeah, it's going to be a ton of fun to play. So look forward to more Lorwyn Eclipsed brews on this channel. We'll be putting a video live, hopefully every single day, packed with decks full of new cards. So let me know what you think about the cards mentioned in this video. And thank you so much for watching.